All right, ready to dive deep.
Always. What are we tackling today?
Constitutions.
Oh, Kristen.
Specifically, India's.
This is going to be good.
It really is. We're going to figure out what it is, why it matters,
Right.
and how it even came to be.
You're in for a treat, you know?
I think so.
This document impacts the lives of over 1 billion people.
That's a lot of people.
It's huge. And it's a fascinating journey, too, through history, politics.
Wow.
It's the essence of a nation.
It really is. You know, we hear all the time about laws,
Right.
rules. Have you ever, stopped and thought what it would really take to build all that from scratch
Oh, absolutely.
for a whole country? I mean,
Yeah.
where would you even start?
Yeah. You're hitting on something really crucial there, actually.
Am I?
Yeah. The human element of constitution building, it's more than just writing rules.
Yeah.
It's about capturing hopes and values, the aspirations of a really diverse population.
Right, because India has a lot of different kinds of people.
A lot of different people. And that's precisely where a constitution comes in.
Okay, so it's like the DNA of the nation.
It is. You could think about it like that. It's the blueprint for how things work.
Okay, got it.
It defines the very nature of India's political system. Think of it kind of like the instruction manual for how power is shared and how citizens are governed.
It's the bedrock.
The bedrock
You got it.
on which everything else is built.
Absolutely.
You got it.
I like that. I'm picking up what you're putting down. And our sources actually dive into some pretty crucial functions
Yes.
of constitutions. Like, they don't just tell the government what to do.
Right.
They set the rules of the game for how the whole system even operates. It's
Sure.
like, instead of just playing Monopoly, you decide what the rules of Monopoly are going to be.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Before you even start.
100%. And crucially, constitutions protect fundamental rights and freedoms. Think of it as a shield against tyranny.
Big shield. Big shield. Yeah. Making sure that individual liberties aren't trampled on.
Okay, so then that begs the question, why even bother with a constitution at all?
Right.
Why not just play it by ear?
Yeah. Why not just figure it out as you go?
Yeah.
Right.
What makes this document more than a bunch of fancy words on really old paper?
Well, in India's case, you really can't separate the why from the when.
Okay.
So imagine this. It's 1947.
Okay.
The nation has just broken free from British rule.
Right.
After centuries,
Wow.
there's this electric energy, right,
Yeah.
of a fresh start, but also this immense pressure to get it right.
Talk about a high-stakes situation.
Exactly. High stakes. It wasn't just about independence, though, was it?
Right.
They also had to unify all these princely states,
Oh, right.
each with their own history and their own way of doing things.
It wasn't just like one country becoming independent. It was like
Yeah.
all these little
He's-
pieces.
It was like piecing together this giant, intricate puzzle. And that's where the Constituent Assembly comes in.
Okay.
Now, this wasn't just some exclusive club
Right.
making decisions in a vacuum.
Okay.
It was actually a remarkably diverse body
Okay.
of elected representatives.
Oh, wow. So they actually represented the people they were creating this constitution for.
Absolutely. We're talking people from all walks of life.
Wow.
Different regions, religions, languages, ideologies.
Wow. That's amazing.
Luminaries. Like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, a fierce advocate for social justice,
Right.
who himself had faced discrimination.
Yes.
And Sardar Patel, who was instrumental in uniting those princely states that you mentioned earlier,
Bringing it all together.
bringing it all together. Their contributions were monumental.
I bet. Just having those incredibly influential figures involved must have lent some serious weight to this whole process.
Without a doubt. Their involvement gave the process credibility,
Right.
ensured that diverse voices
Right.
and perspectives weren't just heard, but that they actually shaped the very foundation of the nation.
Wow.
And that leads us to the first pillar our sources highlight, the credibility of the makers.
Okay, that makes sense. But I've heard people call India's constitution a borrowed document,
Right.
implying that it's just a copycat of other countries' systems.
Yeah.
What's the truth to that?
It's true that the drafters, they drew inspiration from various sources.
Yeah.
The American Bill of Rights, the British parliamentary system,
Right. I could see that.
even aspects of Irish and French constitutions.
Wow.
But they weren't just copying and pasting. They very meticulously adapted these ideas
Right.
to fit India's unique social fabric, its challenges, its aspirations for the future.
So it's more like taking inspiration from a recipe,
Yes.
but adding your own spices to create something totally unique and flavorful.
Exactly. I like that analogy.
It's a good one.
It is a good one. So, for instance, they adopted the British parliamentary system,
Okay.
but with a twist.
Okay.
They incorporated a very strong federal structure,
Okay.
acknowledging the need to balance power
Right.
between that central government and those individual states.
Right, because India is so diverse and so big that a one-size-fits-all approach just wouldn't work.
Exactly.
Exactly.
They had to strike a balance.
They had to. They had to strike a balance.
But what were the guiding principles that helped them create this Indianized version?
Sources highlight 3 pillars
Okay.
that give the Indian Constitution its authority.
Okay.
We've already touched upon the first one.
Credibility.
The credibility,
Yeah.
yes, of its makers. The second pillar focuses on the intelligent organization of power.
Ooh.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting.
Intelligent organization of power.
Yes,
That sounds intriguing.
it is.
So they weren't just like making this up as they went along. There was a deliberate strategy
Okay.
behind it all. Absolutely. The drafters of the Indian Constitution, they were acutely aware of the dangers of unchecked power. They'd seen firsthand, under colonial rule, what could happen when power gets concentrated in the hands of just a few.
Right, yeah.
So they took inspiration from this principle of separation of powers.
Okay, break it down for me. Separation of powers. What does that even mean?
Okay. Imagine a 3-legged stool.
Okay.
Each leg represents a different branch of government. You've got the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary.
All right. 3 branches, each with its own specific role to play. So they're not all just hanging out in the same room making decisions together, I'm guessing.
No. You got it. The executive branch is like the doer,
The doer.
the one responsible for actually implementing and enforcing the laws. Think the president, the prime minister, the cabinet.
Okay.
They're all part of that executive branch.
So that makes sense. The one's actually putting the plans into action.
Exactly.
Okay. So what about the other 2 legs of our stool?
Well, the legislative branch is like the architect, responsible for drafting and passing laws. In India's case, that's the parliament.
Right, the lawmakers.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the doers, we've got the lawmakers. Who's left?
We've got the judiciary,
Okay.
or the courts.
Yeah.
They act as the referee.
Okay.
Their job is to interpret the laws, the ones that the legislature passes,
Right.
and make sure that they jive with the Constitution.
So wait, if the courts think a law is, like, unfair or that it goes against the Constitution, they can actually overrule the parliament.
They can.
That's some serious power.
It is. It's called judicial review. It's
Right.
a cornerstone of the Indian Constitution. And one fascinating example of this is the case surrounding the right to property.
Okay.
Initially, this right was actually considered a fundamental right,
Okay.
much like the right to equality or the freedom of speech.
Right.
You know,
I can see why that would be considered a fundamental right. I mean, having a place to live, owning land, that feels pretty basic.
absolutely. But over time, this debate emerged. What should the government's role be in ensuring equitable access to land, especially in a country with vast disparities in wealth?
Right.
This tension between those individual property rights and those broader social justice goals, it came to a head in the courts.
So the courts had to kind of weigh these competing interests, the right to property versus this need for social justice.
They did.
That must have been a tough one.
It was a landmark case,
Yeah.
and it ultimately led to a significant amendment to the Constitution. The right to property was actually removed from the list of fundamental rights.
Ah. So the Constitution isn't just set in stone. It can evolve and adapt to these changing social and political realities.
Precisely. And that right there is a testament to the foresight of its framers, because they understood that a constitution, for it to endure, it couldn't be static.
Right.
It had to be a living document,
Yeah.
capable of responding to the needs of a changing society.
Wow. Okay, so that's 2 pillars down. We've got the credibility of the makers and the intelligent organization of power. What's that 3rd pillar that underpins the Indian Constitution's authority?
The third, and perhaps the most crucial pillar, is its resonance with the people.
Okay.
The Constitution's endurance lies in its embodiment of values that resonated and continue to resonate deeply with Indians.
Okay.
We're talking about social justice, individual rights, secularism.
You know, it's one thing to kind of write down these lofty ideals in a document,
Yeah.
but it's quite another to actually breathe life into them.
Right.
So how did the Indian Constitution bridge that gap?
Well, that's where things get really, really interesting.
Okay.
Take, for instance, the issue of untouchability.
Okay.
Centuries-old social hierarchy
Right.
that discriminated against certain communities, deeming them untouchable.
Right.
The Indian Constitution didn't just condemn this practice,
Right.
it abolished it outright.
Wow.
Article 17 made it illegal, a powerful statement that challenged deeply ingrained societal norms.
To actually outlaw a practice so deeply entrenched in society like that, that's a bold move.
It is.
It shows they were serious about putting those values of equality and justice into action.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about these grand gestures either. The Constitution also included specific provisions to safeguard the interests of minority groups,
Okay.
whether based on religion, language, or culture.
Right.
For example, educational institutions run by minorities,
Yes.
granted protection, autonomy.
So it was about creating a system where everyone, regardless of their background,
Yes.
felt like they belonged, like their rights were protected.
Precisely. And this commitment to inclusivity, it wasn't just a one-time thing. It's woven into the very fabric of the Constitution.
Wow.
It's evident in the way that new states have been formed based on linguistic and cultural identities,
Oh, interesting.
demonstrating the Constitution's adaptability, its
Yeah.
responsiveness to these diverse aspirations of its people.
That's fascinating. It's like this document has been the guiding force behind India's journey as a nation, navigating all these complexities, adapting to new challenges. But it hasn't always been smooth sailing, has it?
You're right. No country's journey is without its share of challenges,
Right.
and India is no exception. Take, for instance, the relationship between the central government and the states.
Right, that whole balancing act of power we talked about earlier.
Yes.
I imagine that can lead to some friction with both sides wanting to call the shots.
It's a constant negotiation,
Right.
finding that equilibrium. One really prominent example of this delicate dance is the case of Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay.
This state had a unique status under Article 370 of the Constitution,
Right.
granting it a high degree of autonomy.
Okay. So a bit more independence in how it governed itself compared to other states.
Exactly. This arrangement stemmed from the complex historical circumstances surrounding Jammu and Kashmir's accession to India. However, this special status became a focal point of debate, with arguments both for and against its continuation.
Of course.
In 2019, Article 370 was revoked, integrating Jammu and Kashmir more fully into the Indian Union.
Wow. So even provisions that were once seen as fundamental can be revisited,
Yes.
reinterpreted as a nation kind of grapples with its identity and its future. It really highlights how dynamic this whole process is.
Absolutely. And this dynamism isn't just confined to the halls of Parliament or the courtroom. It trickles down to the very communities we live in. The Indian Constitution, you see, it recognizes the importance of local governance.
Right. Bringing democracy closer to home.
Exactly.
We're talking about things that affect our everyday lives.
Exactly. The Constitution actually mandates a system of Panchayati Raj, which essentially means local self-government,
Okay.
particularly in rural areas. Think village councils making decisions about local issues,
Yeah.
water management, sanitation, education. And in urban areas, you've got municipalities responsible for everything from garbage collection to street lighting.
So it's about empowering people at the grassroots level to have a say in how their communities are run.
Precisely. And the 73rd and 74th Amendments, back in 1993,
Yes.
game changers in this regard.
Okay.
These amendments, they mandated regular elections for these local bodies, ensuring that they are accountable to the people that they serve.
That makes a lot of sense. Regular elections, that's how you keep things transparent and make sure people's voices are heard.
Absolutely. And it goes even further. These amendments also introduced reservations for women and marginalized groups within these local bodies,
Oh, wow.
ensuring that those diverse voices are represented in the decision-making process.
That's fantastic. It's about recognizing that for a true democracy to thrive,
Yes.
it needs to be inclusive. It needs
Yeah.
to reflect the voices of all of its citizens.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of the Indian Constitution. It's a testament to the power of dialogue, debate, and the constant striving for a more just and equitable society.
It's been incredible to really delve into the heart of this document,
Yeah.
to see how it touches the lives of over 1 billion people, from the national stage right down to our neighborhoods. But I have to ask, even with all of its strengths, is the Indian Constitution perfect? Are there still areas where it could evolve?
Well, you've hit on a very crucial point. No constitution, no matter how well crafted, can claim to be perfect. It's an ongoing experiment, a reflection of a nation's evolving values, its aspirations.
So what are some of the conversations happening right now? What aspects of the Indian Constitution are being debated or even contested?
Well, there are ongoing discussions about electoral reforms,
Okay.
ensuring that elections are free, they're fair, they're truly representative.
Okay.
There's also a lot of talk about increasing women's representation, not just in local bodies, but at all levels of government. And then there's the ever-thorny issue of campaign finance reform, addressing the influence of money in politics. These are just a few of the many conversations shaping the ongoing evolution of the Indian Constitution.
It's inspiring, really, this idea that the conversation never truly ends, that a constitution at its heart is a living, breathing entity, constantly adapting to the needs and aspirations of its people.
And that, I think, is a perfect note to end on. The Indian Constitution, it isn't just a document gathering dust in some vault. It's a testament to the power of collective action, of compromise, and this enduring belief in the power of democracy.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you, our listener, with this. If you had the opportunity to be a part of this ongoing conversation, what changes or additions would you advocate for, and why? It's a question worth pondering. After all, the Indian Constitution, like any democracy, is a work in progress. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.